Hi, everyone. Thanks for taking a little time out of your day to join us. My name is Matt Dunn. I run strategy and creative here at VShift. I also lead VShift's leadership advisory practice area, which is our strategic consulting service. Really appreciate you guys taking the time. If you're just getting to know us, VShift is a customer engagement and digital experience agency. We bring together consulting, creative, marketing, technology, to help companies in regulated industries grow. I'm lucky to be joined today by a longtime client and our collaborator on our leadership advisory engagements, Reham Alikani. Most recently, Reham served as the Senior Vice President and Chief Marketing and Communications Officer at BJC Healthcare, which is one of the United States' largest healthcare systems. Prior to that, Reham was the Chief Marketing and Communications Officer at Freddie Mac in their single family business and has served in a variety of executive marketing and communication roles, Marsh, Prudential Financial, many others. She's also a passionate advocate for developing and advancing women in the workplace and an excellent follow on LinkedIn, if I do say so myself. Hi, Reham. Thanks for doing this with us today. Good to see you.
Hey, thanks, Matt. And yeah, thank you for the warm introduction there. And yeah, I love talking brands, so let's do this.
Yeah, fantastic. So today, Reham and I wanted to talk about how we help companies build a cohesive brand and a compelling brand experience. But we kind of wanted to do it through a little bit of a different lens, right? In my experience, most of these brand conversations sort of pick up once budget exists or assumes there's a whole lot of organizational buy-in. This talk is more about how you get there, right? How you build the momentum and the understanding, how you engage with leaders and help everyone kind of get more strategic and build more alignment. In other words, if you believe that your organization needs to improve their brand experience, how do you make that happen? So we wanted to give you some insight and ideas into how senior executives like Reham go about making strategic change happen. And how those of us who support these efforts, either an agency like VShift or if you're an in-house leader, can be an effective partner in that effort, right? How you can help own and drive and bridge things together for people. How you can connect with that overarching strategy and how you can successfully implement that change across the organization. We'd love to get your questions. Reham and I will follow up directly with each one of you. We're also going to make the slides that we're sharing here, all of which are things that you and I have both used regularly available if you want them. So thanks again for your time, everyone. We really appreciate it. And Reham, get into it.
All right.
Let's start here. So when it comes to brand and brand experience, right? Where have you observed that most organizations are starting from, right? Is there an understanding of what you mean when you say that? And more importantly, if there isn't, how do you approach building that understanding inside of your companies?
Yeah, so let me start by answering kind of your first question about is there that understanding or not? The,
Sure.
the diplomatic answer is yes, but I think realistically it's not as far and as deep as
Right.
we would like it as marketers.
Right.
So usually there's definitely room for advocating and educating on
Right.
brand more, and which brings me to the second part of your question, which I think is really more important, if I can say that. And so, how do you get your organization at large to
Mm-hmm.
understand what brand is and why it's important? And I think one of the ways to do that is the we've used this chart before, and thank you
Right.
for making it available to everyone. Is really trying to put, as it does here, brand at the center and show the various touch points and interactions and influences that the brand has and is
Right.
impacted by. And so one of the main ones here that is very important to show is that you connect the brand and the brand experience to the business strategy. They have to be one connected. They have to feed off of each other.
Right.
And talking about that, showing it visually is very important. The second thing is, as you can see, there are a lot of components here. Well, if brand is at the center, and for us to be able to affect an impactful brand strategy, you have to break down those silos. And so having that conversation is very helpful as well to break down some organizational silos that may exist.
Right.
And then last but not least, what I find very powerful in talking about brand this way, relating it to business goals and strategies, talking about the different groups and the breaking down of silos that needs to occur, is that once you do that, you can explain that to senior leadership and get the buy-in. And with buy-in come things like budget, which you talked about at the top here,
Right.
about that often we assume that the budget is there. Well, no, that's not really the case. So I found that to be a very effective way to get buy-in and to get things like budget by tying and putting brand at the center of our business strategy and of the various groups within our organization.
Right. Right. Yeah. I
And
mean, oh, go
yeah,
ahead. Sorry, please.
no, go ahead. I was going to say, but this is all great, but then there's kind of the execution part of all of this. And I guess maybe that's where you can talk a little bit about your perspective.
That 1000%, right? Because I think, what I take from this is that, I think it's important for everyone to remember, especially non-marketers, to remember that it makes perfect sense that most colleagues are not thinking about brand experience every day, right? It's like it's not their job. It's our job as marketing leaders and experience leaders to sort of advocate for and educate on the importance of that, right? I actually saw a thing the other day, which it was in Forrester. It said 90% of CEOs thought their organization was customer centric, but only 58% of CMOs did, right? So there's a disconnect that happens there, and it's not that others don't care; it's that it may be top of mind, and then the question becomes sort of like how do you activate on that, right? So I use actually the exact same idea, right? But I try to bring it down a level with an eye towards implementing this, as you said, right? And so, just using, this recent project and as an example, and using the customer onboarding team as an example, you're sort of seeing three different things, not wildly dissimilar to what you were talking about, right? One is helping a team see that they're critical to delivering that experience, right? So in this particular case, sort of the core pillars of the experience and of the brand are sort of ease of use and access, right? And obviously the onboarding team is sort of central to that. It's helping them see themselves in the strategy, right? So that's one. And then second, translating those sort of abstract goals into very practical operational improvements. So that's showing these are the 5 or 6 initiatives that we're really going to focus on this year in order to sort of help advance this brand experience. And then third, it's really important, I think, that everyone understands that this isn't here's what we would like to have happen. Now you go away and do it and let us know if you get to it. This is an active process. So it's establishing the expectation that there's going to be this back and forth. They're going to be part of the brand team. Someone from the brand team is going to be working with your team so that we're ensuring kind of this cohesiveness, not just of the experience, but of like collaboration, right? So I found this to be really, really useful, and it pairs really nicely with what you're talking about sort of at the executive level and kind of bringing it down to the more operational level. And what I think we're both talking about, right, at the end of the day, is this really is about making this process of change like real and actionable and valuable for people, both, kind of up at your colleagues level, but down into the functions, both inside of marketing, and outside of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're exactly right, because if it remains theoretical and it doesn't become
Right.
tangible and actionable quickly, that's where it's going to remain theoretical, and you're not going to get that buy-in, and you're not going to get the participation and the breaking down of silos that you need to be successful. So it does need to be tangible and actionable, and understood that way as quickly as possible.
Yeah, well said. That's great. Okay, so I want to shift gears a little bit, or maybe dive a little bit deeper into that idea that you're really talking about, which is about sort of connecting growth to brand experience. And you sort of started there, right? So I'd imagine that, sort of in your experience, that most executives and team leaders would sort of agree with that sentiment. Um, but it may not be the animating force, meaning it can sort of be hard to connect the dots between experience and growth. How do you do that for people?
Yeah, and you're right. It's important, but it's not always intuitive. And so you actually have to do it. You have to create those connections. And there's so two good reasons. I'm sure
Hmm.
there are many reasons, but I can think of two good reasons why you want to do that. One is when you do that, when you connect the two, the
Hmm.
brand experience and the brand goals to the organizational desired experience and the organizational goals, this way it makes sense to all of the organization what you're doing.
Right.
And the second reason that I found very, very helpful, and I'm sure many watching this webinar and tuning in would as well, is you have a framework to make decisions, which is
Right. Right.
incredibly important in the
Yeah.
world of marketing where we have a lot of priorities and a lot of things to do. So
Yep.
I love the framework that you have up there. We have used that one before
Right.
together, and I'm glad you're making it available to everyone. Of course, people can customize it, but it's a really easy, and I'm a visual person. It's a good way to lay out, what is the goal? What are the strategies? Here are the programs, and here are the
Right.
outcomes for the consumer, for others, wherever that value is needed. And
Right.
so um, it it ties brand to growth. So that's number one. Number two, it actually ties programs that we have in marketing to growth.
Right.
We're not just doing programs for the sake of doing programs.
Right.
Oh, and by the
Right.
way, that last box, those values, what is the value coming out of those programs, coming out of those goals that we've set
Right.
forth, is a very powerful tool to make it clear, make it sense, and help us as marketers also decide what we're doing and whether it fits and whether it's aligned or not to a particular goal. So I love that. I think it drives a very clear understanding in the organization.
Right.
And I think from an execution standpoint, again, I'll throw it back to you more on the execution part and say it's probably helpful to have this framework as well.
That, yeah, that 1,000% is probably my most used sort of tool in the toolkit, right? Because in our leadership advisory world, we describe what we call what you just described the theory of growth, right? It's like this organizing principle and then the programs that you're going to bring together in order to sort of accomplish whatever those specific goals are. And the reason why I like this is it can be used to support like a lot of different business priorities, right? Like growth is usually the primary one, but modernization or efficiency or something like that. But it can also be shrunk down. So for instance, to like a discipline, like these are our digital goals, and here's how we're going to sort of accomplish them, and here are the programs, right? It's just A to B to C is really useful. But then what I usually then try to do is to really focus on those dark rectangles because those are the programs, and that's what you need to translate into action. So then the question becomes, how do you do that? And there are a lot of ways to do it, right? This one's my favorite, like yours. It's sort of super simple, very practical. Also works for an executive review in addition to like a team, but it's really designed to do three things really, really clearly, right? One is to create this sort of shared view of success, right? Everyone knows why we're doing what we're doing to build our brand, right? It's connecting those dots for people. It's sort of that center dot that we showed before. Um, so that's one. But two, once you know that your programs are aligned to the organizational goals, it gives teams sort of the ability to say no a little bit more and to feel supported in pushing back on lower value work because as you run these organizations, as you know, time gets sucked up and decisions get sort of dictated by politics, and that's never going to completely go away, but it can often sort of consume everyone's time, and this gives you a mechanism to stay focused on that sort of brand experience, right? It's a little bit of a response to those pressures. um, and then the third, and maybe the sort of more positive version of that, is it allows everyone to really stay focused on those higher value opportunities and connect their work back to growth. So the teams are doing more of what you want and what you're paying them to do, right? Be focused on those higher value, strategic, growth oriented experiences, because they feel like there's a thing that they can point to that justifies the decisions that they're making, and it sort of arms everyone with really a set of marching orders that they can sort of take forward. I feel like I should maybe pause for a second and say, we've talked about this. Like, I realize that this may look a little bit constraining, and look limiting, but my experience has shown generally that's not what happens, right? I found that teams and leaders kind of really appreciate the rationale, and having some experience that really feels objective. I don't know. I'm assuming you've sort of seen the same.
Oh, absolutely. And two things that I've seen are a bit of a struggle when it comes to brand
Sure.
is, in my experience at least, it's focus that this
Mm.
is what we're doing, and then
Yep.
follow through, make sure that we are doing what we said we are going to do. And so having kind of that outside perspective that you bring to say, hey,
Right.
remember, like that you're falling back into habits where you're not focusing on the things that are going to achieve the goal that you've set out for yourself, or you're not following through and not measuring what you're doing, and having that
Right.
external voice and
Right.
perspective has been incredibly, incredibly valuable for us.
Right. And I think it's sort of especially true on things where, what you're working on may at times feel a little bit more abstract, right? You're not trying to, reduce call center times by, from X to Y. These are big ideas around, what does it mean to improve a brand experience? What this does is it brings it down to a place, that is sort of actionable, so that everyone can sort of chart that path forward, that path forward together. So really, really good points.
Yeah, and I think it gives everybody a shared view, right?
Yeah,
That we,
for
we all
sure.
agree, these are the priorities, here's what we're doing, and everyone, not just people in marketing, but everyone has that shared view and understand what we're doing, why we're doing it, and brings it back to the theory of growth. And then there's a strategic planning process in place. It's not just doing whatever is the flavor of the day. There's a planning process that is in place, which again I've found to be extremely valuable, and extremely valuable in aligning the organization as a whole as well.
Right. That's actually a great transition to sort of the third thing that I wanted to talk to you about. It's almost as if we've been doing this together for a really long time. Let's finish up with this. I know that you and I and most people probably watching this share the view that like a brand is a living thing, right? Which to me means that the management of it should be living too, right? But I've observed that a lot of the mechanisms for doing that can feel, I'll use the word static, right? Like old vision statements or consultant deliverables or brand guidelines that don't change, things like that, right? So I guess my question for you as, CMO is like, how do you think about managing this strategy in kind of a more active and involved way, especially, obviously at the executive level, but potentially even at, sort of a VP, kind of critical owner level, right? Where it's about discussion and collaboration and, relationships. How do you go about managing this process?
Yeah, and I know you were talking about brand experience, and that's what we're talking about today. But I think managing those types of large
Yeah, that's fair.
marketing-led
Yep.
initiatives is we need to think about it the same way.
Yep.
And to be honest, early on in my career, I did that kind of alignment and decision making with others. I would say a little bit more organically. So it would have been a one-off conversation, an
Yep.
email to someone. But
Yep.
then several years ago, as you may recall, we were working on several very high-profile digital initiatives, marketing
Yep.
initiatives,
Yep.
and you guys came to me with an idea of creating something called a stakeholder advisory group.
Yep.
From then on, it was called SAG, and that's the name that I just used for it now. But
Yep.
regardless of what you call it, the idea is to have a group of stakeholders, as the name suggests, but really decision makers.
Yep.
And they are from across the organization. You can have a head of IT or a VP of
Yep.
IT, compliance, risk if they're separate, product owners, sales, head of sales.
Yep.
And it's this forum that's a lot more structured than my organic way of doing things, where there is that structured conversation that
Yep.
allows us to, number one, align. So in the case
Yep.
of brand experience, there's an alignment on what brand experience is, what the brand is. And so there's that more cohesive brand experience across the multiple areas.
Yep.
Also, as I said, the choice of those stakeholders that are in the SAG is very important because you want that body to be able to make decisions. So that's the other benefit of having
Yep.
that group is you have a forum with the right people in it who can make decisions.
Yep.
And then last but not least is when you're able to make those decisions, when you're able to have that aligned vision on brand and what brand experience is, you're enabling all of these other groups that you see on this somewhat busy chart there, but it's very important. You have the working group, you have the strategist. They all feel empowered
Right.
and they have clarity of direction because there is a group that is represents the decision makers that
Yep.
they work with or for, and there is that alignment at the top, and there's that decision and clarity being made at that top group that then allows them to go and do what they need to do, execute effectively, efficiently. And you've been part of the stakeholder groups. You've that definitely,
Yep.
but also working with those working groups and leading them and hopefully you've seen that there's that more effective and empowered
For
capability
sure.
that they have to execute.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know my view that the best ways that this works is that there are really two groups, right? There's the SAG that you're describing, and then there's the sort of executional group, the working groups, sort of working together, right? And so, to translate what the leadership group is, deciding and doing into sort of actionable alignment, I have my own way of doing that. It's really sort of anchored in a basic service design methodology, right? Utilizing a service design framework, kind of like what's up here. It's something that those of you who have worked in this industry a long time probably sort of know intuitively, even if you don't use the word service design for it, right? But it's really designed to give structure, right, on how to like activate a program, right? So I tend to put this up every time that we are talking about a branded experience initiative or a program, and there's sort of three reasons why I have found it helpful. And in this particular instance, we're looking at like what is the high level service design model for like an onboarding experience, just to use that as an example, right? I do it for three reasons. One is it helps to like, it's a zoom out, right? It gives you a holistic view of the program, right? It forces you to look at not just what your customers are experiencing, but what are the things that the organization needs to put in place in order for this thing to be delivered um, in like the best possible way that it can be, not just sort of done and out the door, but like really what needs to come together for this to be great, right? Um, and that backstage part of this really, really matters because that's honestly where all the follow through happens, right? That's where the delivery really happens. And if that fails, then from a brand experience perspective, it's going to be a net negative experience, more or less, right? And this really is useful at putting the attention onto something that I think a lot of organizations tend to overlook. What are we going to do to actually bring this thing to life, right? Um, so those are the first two, but like the third that I don't want to lose sight of is because this is holistic. I found it's really useful that everyone can kind of see their role, even in something like that's specific, like onboarding. And so they can see where they fit into this. They may not be the biggest square every time, but everybody has a role in it. And so it's keeping everyone on the same page and helping everyone see that their contributions, and if you combine it with sort of everything else that we've talked about, is, contributing towards that better brand experience. It's contributing towards growth, and it's drawing that line for people, right? And so when I'm talking about programs, this really kind of becomes, our touchstone, because it's like a really easy way to ensure kind of a cross-functional end-to-end, approach. And I love this diagram. So I realized it's like we're spending a lot of time talking about talking, right? Which is a consultant, right? I've come to accept, but I'm a creative at heart. I know you're a creative at heart too. I know that must drive you kind of as crazy as it does me sometimes, but it's kind of the way it is.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't, in terms of driving me crazy, because
Sure.
as much as I love, and you know that, and most of us do design and positioning and creating advertising and
Right.
customer experience and the digital work we can do, and I love it, all of that. However, that talking to me means it's collaboration, it's decision making, and we're
Right.
not talking about talking in an unstructured way. A lot of the
Good point.
tools really that we've talked about today, which again I'm really glad we're making them available to everyone, allow you to have structured, purposeful, meaningful conversations that enable decision making and enable execution. And look, we can have many other webinars on design, and we should, but this is very foundational. The how to get the organization aligned, how to relate what you do to the theory of growth. That's what we've been talking about today,
Mm-hmm.
and that is critical before you get into all of the great and fun work of, and sometimes painful, design and positioning and all
Right.
of that.
Right.
And that's why what we're talking about today is very, very important.
Yeah,
And
I mean, yeah, that's true, and well said, I think, right? Because in the end, building that strong brand and that strong brand experience, it comes down to like two things, right? One is the alignment, that stakeholder alignment, and two, making it real for people so that they can see their role in it, right? And actually, you know what? I probably had a third, which is like getting work into the market and making things happen like quickly, because the best argument for change is change. And I think the focus that this delivers is really useful to sort of accomplishing that third goal, as well,
yeah,
right?
and I think, I've worked with VShift for many years, and part of the reason is you're good at those three things. Making sure that there's that alignment and understanding, and then making sure that there's an actual plan and it's real and it's tangible, and then getting something out to market in a relatively short amount of time, but something meaningful, not just something that actually can have an
Right.
impact. And that's, why I've worked with you guys for so long.
Yeah. Well, it's been a great partnership. Next time, I promise we will do a webinar just where we just critique commercials. It'll be super
Oh,
fun.
I love it. Let's do that.
All right, fantastic. So it looks like we're bumping up time here. So I want to let folks get back to your day. I want to let you get back to your day. But I really appreciate you obviously taking the time, and everyone else, to listen. We felt it was really important to talk about brand building in kind of this different lens, right? Taking a little bit more of this executive level view, which I think a lot of people don't. I feel very fortunate. I get the benefit of seeing this sort of firsthand, but not everybody does. So I think it's useful to sort of see that. So I hope, those of you who joined us, heard something interesting, something useful, to take back to your own projects. We did get some good questions. We will follow up with you directly. And if you have any other questions, you can send me an email, matt@vshift.com, or find Reham or myself on LinkedIn. We'd love to chat. Um, Last, got to do the plug. VShift's leadership advisory practice. We provide a range of strategic consulting services designed to help your organization do a lot of what we talked about here today, right? Work more successfully together so that you can create these really impactful experiences for your customers. Plus, you get to work with Reham and me, which is great. You can download an overview of what we do and get all the slides that we talked about at vshift.com/advisory. Reham, thank you as always.
Thanks.
And thanks to all of you for listening. Talk to you soon. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.